All right. We're about to jump in and get started. Thank you for your patience with me. We are going to build a full stack application using the latest version of nextjs, mongoose, and connecting it to a mongodb database. Building a calorie tracker that gives the user the ability to track their daily calories. And you should be able to toggle to it. Let's check it out. Let's see what we got here. All right, so what we have is the full stack calorie tracker application using the latest version of Next.js, which I think it is 16 at this point. Mongoose and MongoDB database, the online database cluster that is, but you can certainly do this with the downloaded version of it as well. It's your personal preference. But ultimately, what we're doing is we're storing meals that we ate or food that we've ate for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and giving ourselves a calorie count for each food item that we ate. So this morning I had some egg whites, which are 70 calories, 9 grams of fat, 12 grams of protein. And I don't know if these are the accurate numbers. I just entered some numbers just so I can get it functioning as I desire. And then I also had some steamed hash browns, about a cup. We'll call it 100 calories, 25 grams of carbs. And at the bottom here, you can see that it is adding those calories up. And the cool thing about this is everything is being done server side. We don't have any front end hooks, no state management to help us with this. Everything is being done by some good old data and code on the server. We are tracking the day by using the JavaScript date object and extracting some data from that and creating some functions. And then as we toggle back to Friday, as you can see, we didn't have any entries for Friday, so we don't have any data there. But if we keep going back to I think the 4th of December, you can see that we had the egg whites for breakfast and some spinach. We were tracking egg whites at 75 calories, 9 grams of fat, 8 grams of protein, some spinach, 10 calories, 2 grams of carbs. For breakfast, we had a total of 85 calories. And this is a great starter project that you could eventually build upon and add more things to if you so choose to. So with that, I am going to, oh, and we have the ability to edit. So if we wanted to change this to uh, 30 grams of spinach, it's a lot of spinach, and we'll call that 12 grams of carbs. Click save. I'm gonna have a refresh done there so that model closes out. But as you can see, the spinach is now updated. And we have the new calorie count in addition to the amount of carbs. And we have the new calorie total now that we've adjusted the amount of calories that we have in our spinach. And of course, if we wanted to delete an item, we have that capability as well. And we'll revalidate path from next cast, it immediately deletes. So if you're looking for a full stack application or a full stack project, doing something to get you built with a little more complexity than what you may be used to at the beginner level, this is going to be perfect. So with that said, I am going to jump into some code. And in the editor, let's go ahead and navigate to the terminal. We'll use the npx command to create the latest version of a Next.js application. And I'll install it in the current directory by adding the space and the dot. Press enter. For the project, I'm going to use the recommended defaults and just give it a few minutes to finish the installation. right, so we have the project installed. And like I said, we have the project in the root directory that is located within VS Code. And the latest version of Next is 16.0.10. I'm just going to remove some of the boiler really quick. And we'll add some structure to the page by styling the body, the HTML, the root, and .app. I'm going to grab all of those and set the height to 100%, the width to 100%. We'll set the default text size to small, and we'll set the overflow on the X. Overflow. Set it to hidden. Cool. And we'll remove the boiler from the page.tsx. Let's go ahead and get it started on our local host. So we'll head back to the terminal and type npm run dev. We'll just give it a minute or two. All right, so it should be going on localhost 3001. Minimize this. And if we navigate to localhost 3001, and if we go ahead and start up the local host, we see that we have the text of homepage on the screen. All right, so we have it up and going on localhost 3001. I want to add Daisy UI to help with some of the styling. Lightweight component library. I know Shad CN is extremely popular, but I don't mind Daisy. I like it. So we'll start by going to the documentation and click on install. I'm pretty sure this is the command you start with, but it has it all laid out right here. So we'll just start by installing this at Daisy UI latest command. Copy it and go back to VS Code, paste it in and install it in the terminal. And the next steps in the doc is to add the app plugin Daisy UI inside of the app.css. So we'll copy it. Minimize this, run global CSS, and save the file. Perfect. So now we can, what's going on, my friend? Long time no see. I appreciate you stopping by. Yeah, we got a late one going tonight. Got a day off and not a lot planned on the calendar, so I figured now is a great time to do a little bit of coding. How have you been? Good, 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 good. I understand. I understand. Yeah, if you got any questions, man, just ask away. I'll be happy to answer them. But now let's test out the plugin to make sure that it is working. So I'll just go back to the page.tsx and then the documentation. And we'll just start with the button component and just install one of the sequences here. We'll click on button sizes. So what we should see are the various sizes of this Daisy UI button using the BTN syntax so that we can establish the size of each button. So we're just going to copy this JSX. We'll click on this. Remove this code. All right, so I have it pasted in. Let's go back to localhost 3001 and see what's on screen. Perfect. So we see the various button sizes. So the Daisy UI plugin is working as we intended. So let's go ahead and begin to build out the application. So if we take a look at it, what we have is basically a header and a feed. So the header just basically has a icon or a logo, if you will, that represents the name of the app. I just called it a JA calorie tracker and did JD right there. This is basically just a header that is sitting above, that is sitting in a layout with a white background and a logo on the far left. And if we want it, we can add authentication and have it to the far right or any other routes that we think this application would need. And then we also have the feed, which has the daily toggle and also the daily food counter. I forget what I named this component, but we'll take a look at it. And if you notice, the daily toggle is reading or storing the dates in the URL, and that is how it is able to not use state, but use server-side rendering or params to help capture and store the date that we are toggling to and from. The plus mark is going to be plus 1 day. The minus will be minus 1 day. So before we jump into this, which is going to be one of the more complex parts of this application, let's go ahead and focus on the header and adding in that logo on the far left-hand side. So we'll go back to VS Code. And we can close out the global.css. And for now, we'll remove the buttons and just add the text of homepage. Click save. All right, now in the root of the project, let's add a folder named underscore components. And the underscore is just so that there isn't any confusion, that this doesn't get mistaken as a actual route. And then inside the components directory, we'll add a file named header.tsx. We'll go ahead and create an export default function named header. And we will return the header HTML tag, and inside of it, we'll just enclose header. Now I want this to be wrapped throughout the application, and because this is a single page app, it could be stored in the page.tsx. But if we ever decided to expand this, we would have to do some refactoring to move it around. So we'll go ahead and store it inside of the layout right now. And so let's add a route grouping in the app directory so that we can group our routes together, and I'll name the group website. And the way you create a route group is you add parentheses around it in Next.js. That tells Next to ignore this as a route and to treat everything within this directory, give it the exact same layout, error message, suspense experience. And then we'll just add a file named layout.tsx. And we know that layout is a special name in Next, that it's a reserved keyword that you can only use, or once you use it, there's a expected experience to go along with it. So in the grouping, we'll just add a file named layout.tsx. And I'll use the RAFCE snippet from Visual Studio Code to create a export const. We'll remove the layout text, replace it with children enclosed in brackets so that we're passing it in. We'll just click save, and let's go back and visit the local host to make sure we're not getting any errors. Perfect, everything is still intact as we intended. Now let's import the header that we just exported within the components directory. And then above, or right below the div above the children enclosed in brackets, we'll bring in that header. Now let's check our home page, and you see we have header right above home page. So perfect. So let's go ahead and begin to style this a little bit. The only styling that we want within the header is just to set the height of the page and also the text in addition to the background color. So we'll give this div a class name of height of full. We'll set the background to neutral 50. And we'll set the text to neutral 900. Let's save this and check it out. And as you can see, we have the header there. The background color has slightly changed. Maybe a little hard to see right now, but once we set the background color of the header, you'll be able to distinguish it a lot better. And then we'll go to the header. Now let's begin to style it. So inside of this header, like I said, as we saw previously, is very, very basic. But we'll just add some styling so that it sticks out uniquely and give it the header a class name of border bottom, and we'll set it to border neutral 900, and we'll set the background color to white. Actually, I think I'll change this to 200. All right, now let's check this out. And you can see that we have the header is now a white color, slightly different than the background of the page. And we also have this border on the bottom that is a light gray color, distinguished by border neutral 200. Perfect. So we'll head back to the code editor, and let's begin to add a little more styling. We'll remove the header text, place it with a nav. We'll just add header. Give this a class name of margins of auto, so that whatever size we distinguish, the margins on the left and the right are even. And it will set the height of this to full, the width to full, and we'll set the width to maximum width of 5XL. We'll go padding on the X of 4. We'll set the direction to flex, center the items on the X axis, and go justify between. No, I'm sorry, we'll do justify start for this because there won't be much inside of it. So let's just click save to make sure we're getting the layout as we intended. Oh, I didn't set the height appropriately. Let me go back. So I set it to full. Let's set it to 14. Now let's check it out. That's perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. All right, so now let's build in a little logo, and just so you can remember what that looked like, it was just the text with a background and my name and just the name of this application. So let's do that now. All right, so this is ultimately what we're going for. Let's go ahead and focus on this little logo component now. So inside of the components directory, I'll add a file named logo.tsx. And we'll just go export default function logo and just return a div, the name of logo. We'll import it into header. No, I'm sorry, this goes to logo. There. And just bring it in. Click save. And we now see the logo text on screen. So now let's go ahead and work on bringing it to life. And I'm gonna head to the logo file and remove this div. I'm not gonna bore you with typing this out, but I will show it, of course. So basically what we have is a div container that holds the items in a flex direction centered on the x-axis with a gap of 2. And then we have the icon, if you will, with the characters JD in a grid. We set the height and width to 9. We placed them in the center and gave it the edges around it of large. Set the background color, the text neutral 900 and the text color to neutral 50. And then outside of that div, we have the actual name itself. We have the leading text set to type, and we also move the text direction to right. The initial p tag has the JA-DAT. The text is set to fall and set to small, and the font is set to semi-bold. And then we have another p tag with the text set to extra small, the color set to 500. Now if we click save and go back and check it out, you see that we now have the logo on screen of the JD with the JA-DAT and the text of calorie tracker immediately right under it. So perfect. So we can close out the logo and the header for that matter. We actually are done with both. And we'll shift our focus to the page.tsx. And this is where we're going to work on the main layout of the website. Let's just take a look at it. So this is ultimately what we'll be building, a full stack food tracker. What we've built so far is the actual header, and we have the background color of the page. Now we're going to focus on this day selector component. And as I mentioned, we're not using any front end hooks. We're just using all server side code with this, some good old vanilla JavaScript, some APIs provided by JavaScript, and a little bit of manipulation in order to make this work. Probably could have did this with less code using front end hooks, but I just preferred to use Next.js as server rendered, since that is how the framework was intended to be used, and we were able to get this accomplished. So let's go ahead and focus on this component now. So the first thing I want to do is create a helper function that will store within the lib directory that will actually help us with the navigation of the dates in this project, and it's probably one of the most important pieces of the project. We're going to create a file named date.ts, which is going to run on the server. And basically all we're going to have in it is the ability to format the actual dates and make changes to the dates based upon different keys or the URL state updates. So I'm going to go ahead and create that directory now. In the root of the project, a folder named lib. And inside of it, a file named dates.ts. So I'm going to create a series of functions. And again, these are going to be, it's going to be a little bit of pain in the beginning, but once we're done, it's going to make a lot of sense and it'll make things that much easier. But the first one is going to be a function, and I'm going to name this pad2. Inside of this, we'll pass in n, which is going to represent a number. And we want to return n. If it is greater than 10, we want to pass in the actual number itself. So we'll go temporal literals and then the 0, $, and in the curly braces, we'll pass in n. Or we'll just straight pass in $, n as is. So basically what this is saying is that if the number is less than 10, we want to give it a 0 in the front and then pass in n. Remember, with numbers in JavaScript, they don't start with zeros, and we want to pass in the exact same format regardless to if it is a single digit day or the day is day 30 of the month. So that's basically what this function is doing. The next function I want to do is to set the time zone or the time itself, the date, to a specific format so that it'll be easy for us to interact with MongoDB and pull the information by day. So we'll create an export function and we'll name this today ISO. And this will be a string. And inside of this, we'll create a const named D and set it equal to new date, which is the JavaScript date object. We're going to return. And basically with this, all we're wanting to do is just return a specific format. When we click on or we select today, we want to return the year in 4 numbers, a dash, the month in 2 numbers, a dash, and the date in 2 numbers. So of course we'll be using temporal literals to help with this. We'll pass in the $, and we'll go D, which is representing the date, and we'll say get full year. And that is the year format. That's going to give it to us in a number, a 4-digit number. And then we'll have our first dash and we'll pass another curly braces or $ curly braces. We'll go pad2. We'll go d.get month. Excuse me. Which is going to represent the month. And remember, with this, we need to add 1 to it because of the format that it will be returned to us. And then finally, we'll do the exact same thing, curly braces, pad2. With this one, we're going to d.get the date, and that's just going to be today's date. So anytime we use this function, we're going to use it quite a bit. Of today ISO, it's going to be a string. We're creating a const named D to get access to the date object, and it will basically just formatting the date so that every time we call upon this function, we get the local time zone. daily key, and the format is going to be year, month, and then date. And then next, we want to make sure that we are getting a valid date. So, because we want to make sure that we're getting valid data from the front end to the back. So we'll create an export function name is valid ISO date. And we know we may not get anything with this, so we'll need to care for that in the event we don't get anything. So we'll say if s, excuse me, if it is not a string, uh, if it is not a string, we're going to return false. Some simple validation. But if it meets the format, and I always kind of get a little thrown off when I have to type this out. So I have it somewhere that I can access and just copy it in, because this um, I'm just going to replace this with this. And basically what this is just creating a format to make sure that we're getting letters and numbers. And if we're not getting those characters, then it's going to just return false. But if we do get them, then of course it's going to make sure that it is in the appropriate format for a valid date. And the next function will be to make sure that we are parsing PA, I think it should be lowercase PARSESO date for today. This would be a string. And then for this, we're just going to return is valid date so that we can call this function. That was a helper function to this function so that we get the appropriate date, and we have a function that validates it just to keep things nice and modular and a lot easier to read and understand. So that is parsing the ISO date or today. Then we'll need to create one to add a date. So we'll go export function add day ISO. And we'll just pass in ISO will be a string, and the amount will be a number. String number, yep. We'll create a const named D and set it equal to the date object. And specifically, we want to gather a particular format. So we'll go temporal literals with the $sign and the curly braces ISO. And then outside of it, we'll add T00 colon 00 colon 00. Then we'll go D dot set date, D dot get date plus the amount. And outside of that, we want to return the temporal literals and the $sign, curly braces, D dot get full full year. And with this one, we'll go minus $sign, curly braces, pad 2, D dot get month. minus sign, dollar sign, curly braces, pad 2, and then we go d dot get date and just call the date. And this is the function to help us add a day. And then we'll just need one more function. I'm just going to name it human format so that it is easy for us to understand. I think with this one, I will just paste it in and make sure that I'll just go ahead and grab them all at this point. I'm going to make sure that we have these in appropriately. There we go. So we just have the format date, passing in ISO as a string, which is basically just the date is a string, grabbing the date object, storing it in a const name D, and then just returning the local date string. The first parameter is undefined in the event we don't get anything. And then the next we have the week, month, day, year. All of those are being stored as numeric. And I know this is a very unexciting file to type out, but this is kind of what's really giving the brains behind being able to do this all server rendered without any front end hooks and still capturing the date and having the appropriate format once we get ready to use this date to query the database. So certainly have to make sure all of our code is on point, but this has to be on point because this is what's really kind of driving, or what's the logic behind everything that we're doing so that things work out properly. So great. We have the helper function in place. Now we're ready to shift the focus to building out the actual bar itself. So let's close this file out. And inside of the components directory, I'm gonna add a file named food diary daybar.tsx. And let's just get something on screen. We'll create an export default function name food diary daybar. And we'll just return a div. And we'll go food diary daybar. I'm just going to import this in the main page.tsx. So import food diary daybar. And we'll remove the home page text and just bring it in. Now let's see what this looks like. Okay, so you see we have the food diary day bar component on screen. Now we just need to style the page a little bit and go ahead and bring that bar to life. So we'll go back. So inside of this div, let's add some styling first. We'll set the margins to auto, set the width to full, go max width 5XL, padding on the X of 4, on the Y of 6, and we'll go space on the Y of 4. Click save. Now let's take a look at it. Okay, so now it is aligned from a width perspective with the header logo. We have our padding on the Y. You can't really see the padding on the X right now because we have it in a full screen mode, but there's padding on the X as well. So the styling is beginning to, well, has taken shape as we desired. I think underneath this, I'll add some text. So we have a message on screen as well. We'll just give a H1 of home. And let's style this H1 a little bit with text of extra large and make the font semi-bold. Let's check it out. Okay, so we see that we have home as text on screen. So like as I mentioned, the food diary bar, normally you would want to use some form of state in order to manage the dates. But because I want to render as much as I can, as long as I can, everything server side, excuse me, then we need a way for our dates to be remembered since we're not using any form of state management. So I'm going to use the URL parameters to kind of help with that. So we know that we'll be using search params and grabbing it from the URL in order to capture the date and use that date to query the database. So let's go ahead and start by bringing in some imports we're going to need. The first one is going to be the add days ISO and the format human date. And these are going to come from the lib directory. Then we'll just install React icons so that we can have a icon on screen to help with the navigation. And that's done. I'll close this out, That one's going. We can close this one out too. Perfect. And let's go ahead and bring in a couple of icons from React. Icons, FI. The first one is going to be the chevron left, and then FI chevron right. And we're going to pass in the actual dates. We'll use the home page to grab the search params, and we'll pass those parameters to this component. So we'll need to set our type. So we'll go type of props and set it equal to selected ISO. And remember, we created the function inside of the lib directory to kind of help with the formatting of this so that we had the appropriate format being sent to the database to retrieve the actual calorie entries. So then we want to pass this into this function. So we'll go selected ISO and we'll call props. So as you can see, we're getting an error message with this because we don't have those search params, or we don't have the parameter passed into this component. So let's go ahead and do that now. So we'll go back to the page.tsx. I'll set the type to props and we'll go search params and with the question mark because we may not have any. And of course, this is going to be a promise because we'll be waiting to get something back. And then inside of it, we'll just pass in the date. And of course, this will be as a string. Sorry, and that should have an equal sign there. So now we'll need to pass in the search params inside of the homepage component. And then inside of the food diary bar, remember we did selected ISO, and we're going to dynamically pass in the selected. Sorry, I need to bring that in. I just realized I didn't bring this in first. We'll create a const name SB, and we'll set it equal to await. So first, inside of the home search component, we'll need to get access to the search params. So I'll just create a const name SP, which will represent search params, and we'll set it equal to await search params. Or, we could get a empty object back. Hold on. And this needs to be export default async await. There we go. And then with those search params, we're going to create a const named selected ISO and set it equal to the parse, P-A-R-S-E, ISO date today. And that is coming from @/lib. And I did that intentionally to make sure that it auto imports, but we did it correctly and it auto imported. And then we're going to pass in, remember we have to pass in a parameter. We'll pass in the search parameter date. And now inside of the food diary bar, we'll need to pass in the selected ISO, which is basically the date that we have initially started with on the bar that's at the top of the home page. So we'll get that from the URL, the dates. It will always live in the URL, and then it'll be passed down to the food diary bar so that you can see it, but also toggle among dates and see which days you've entered calories and which days you didn't. So that's perfect. So we can save this and go back to the food diary bar just to take a look at the home page. You're not going to notice any difference just yet, but we have all of the functionality. We're beginning to add the functionality in place so that we can start to see the bar with the date and toggle with it. So let's go ahead and add in a little more code so we can bring that to life. So very simple with this. The first thing we want to have is we want to have the ability to toggle between the dates. So we want to be able to go from the previous date and the current, or excuse me, the previous date, today's date, and the next date, so that we can enter food calories if we want to project it in advance and kind of budget out what we already have, or we're just going to take the hey, I'll just eat whatever I want route and just keep track as I go. Whatever floats your boat. We just want to be able to track it, and that's what this calorie tracker is allowing us to do. So the first const is the previous button. So we'll go previous, add ISO, and we'll go selected ISO. And of course, if it is previous, it's going to be selected -1. And then with next, the next const we'll create is next, and set it equal to add ISO selected ISO, and this will be just 1. And this is just giving us the ability to toggle to the previous date and the current date and the next date and all the other dates that we want to toggle in between. That's basically what these two consts are going to give us the ability to do. So I'm just going to replace this div with a section HTML tag, and we'll give it a class name of rounded of extra large. We'll give it border, set the border to neutral 200. We'll set the background color to white, give it some padding on the X of 4, on the Y of 3. And then inside of that section tag, we'll add a P tag, and we'll just name this food diary and give it a text of small, a font of semi-bold, and set the text to neutral 700. Let's click save and see what we have on screen so far. So we have the food diary bar with a border, a white background, and it is taking up the maximum width of the screen. So that's perfect. So underneath this P tag is where we're going to have the actual bar with the day and the left and right arrows. So we'll add a div underneath the closing P tag, and we'll give it a direction of flex and set the items to centered. And then to navigate in between routes, you could use an A tag, but I'm going to use the link tag from next/link. And I'll go ahead and bring it in now. This link will have the FI chevron left. And the main things we need to pass in with the link is a href. So that is going to have a href of, and this is going to be what we use to query and adjust the actual date in the URL. So of course we have to start with a question mark. Well, it's going to be dynamic, number one. So it'd be temporal literals. Well, excuse me, it'd be dynamic. So we'll use the temporal literals, and then we'll have the question mark with date, set it equal to $, curly braces, prev, P-R-E-V, which is the state component that, not the state component, which is the const that we created earlier using the add days ISO function that we added in the lib directory, passing in two parameters, the selected ISO -1 for the previous day. So we'll go ahead and add the area label as well. All right, so the next I want to add a area label of previous day. Yeah, do it like this. And then let's just give it a class name of grid and set the height to 9, the width to 9, place it in the center, go round it right. No, this will be left, rounded left of large. Go border, border neutral 300. And I think I just want to set the background color. Yeah, let's do that too. We'll go background of neutral 900. Then we'll go on hover. We'll set the background to neutral 800 and say active. Change the scale to 0.99. That should work. So let's click save and check this out, see what it looks like. Perfect. So that is the little indicator there. Let's go back. Let me put this inside of a div itself. So I'm gonna copy all of this. Let's place this inside of a div, place it back in. And then now inside of this div, let's give it a class name of flex wrap. We'll place the item centered and go justify center with a gap of 3. There, that's much better. Now it is centered, and in the middle we can add the actual day, and I'll make sure that we can see the left and right arrows. So let's go ahead and bring that to life now. So we have the chevron. Set this text color to neutral 50. There we go. All right, so now let's focus on setting up the actual day itself. And that's going to be right underneath this closing link tag is where we'll have the actual day. And remember, we can display the day just by showing the formatted human date function or by accessing that. And then we know it takes one parameter. The parameter that we're going to pass in is the selected ISO. Before we style it, let's just make sure that we're getting what we intended there, and we see it is showing today's date, which is Saturday, December 13th. So let's just style this a little bit. We'll give it a class name of flex, set the height to none, a minimum width of, we'll make this 260 pixels. And we'll set the items to centered and go justify center. Give it a border neutral of 300. We'll also add a background color of neutral 900. Go padding on the X of 4. Set the text to small. And the font can be set to semi-bold. And it will make the text a neutral 50 color so that it's white. And I know I'm getting this warning. I like to distinguish. It could be written as width 65, but I just like to set it as a personal preference. So nothing that's going to impact the project. It's just Tailwind is recommending that you can take an easier path or use a Tailwind utility and get the exact same measurements. Wouldn't be a bad idea to change it, but I'm not going to worry about it. So now let's check out what this looks like. Perfect. And we see that it is showing today's date. And with the adjusted background. So that's perfect. Let's go border on the Y. Okay, that's better. Yeah, that's the look I was looking for. Sorry, this was a little off, but I forgot the border. But I'll make sure that we have it for the next one. So now we just need to add the right chevron, which I can copy this. And outside of that closing div, we'll paste it back in. First thing we'll do, instead of it saying previous, we'll just have it say next, which is the const that has access to the add date ISO, select the ISO +1 or with 1 function. And then instead of it saying previous day, we'll just update it to say next day. Let's save this, and instead of it being left, let's change it to right. Click save and check it out. So I'll need to change this up a little bit. Make this right. Let's check it now. There we go. So we just needed to change the border from the left to the right. And now we have the desired look of the day toggle. And if you notice, if we hit the back arrow, it reads December 13th, 2025. And if you look in the parameter, it's only giving us +1. So hold on, let me adjust that. Let's see, instead of it being -1, this needs to be equal. Yeah, I knew something had something off of my date, so my apologies. We'll change that to equal. Now let's go save this and let's check it out. 14/14. So we see that the date is reading Monday, December 15th, and the parameter is showing question mark date equals, and that's the format that we wanted in because it's going to help us query the database once we connect it. And if we go back to previous, we see that the days and the URL is updating. That's what's helping us manage the state of the date and what we'll use to actually pull data from the database. So perfect. The functions are working, the toggle is working. Now I'm just going to add the menu icon for the calendar that we don't have functionality to right now, but we'll add in at a later point. I'm just going to go ahead and add it now. So underneath the closing link and the closing div, I'm going to add a button. And this is going to be a calendar. So we'll go back to the React FI icons and import FI calendar. Inside of it, we'll just pass in FI calendar. We don't need to style the icon directly, but we'll give the button a type of button, an area label of open calendar, and I'll just put coming soon. And we'll add the ability to see the days by calendar so you can visually see how well you have or have not been doing with your calorie intake. This will be calendar picker, and just add soon. And we'll just give this a class name of grid with a height and width of 9. We'll place the item centered, go rounded large, go border neutral 300, and set the background to white. I don't think we need anything else. I may want to distinguish that text just to be safe. So we'll go text neutral 700. To keep it consistent because we did the hover for those. Hover background neutral 50 and active. We'll set the scale to 0.99. Click save and let's check it out. So we have the icon there, but it is a little off. It'll be fine for right now. I think this is place item center. Yeah. place item center there. All right, so just change this to place item center, not item center. That's right, because it's flex, not grid. So cool. That takes care of the food diary bar. And just to make sure that it is working as we intended, this gives us access to toggle between dates. Notice that the URL parameter is changing based upon the date that we have selected. December the 9th, 2025, 2025, 12/9. Remember, you have the question mark and the date equals that has to be passed in for the parameter. And we are all set with it. So the next component that we want to build out is the actual component that will hold the food that we will keep track of on a daily basis. This is basically the daily diary, if you will. That is this component that we want to care for next. So I will go ahead and create the component. This is going to be a lengthier build out, because you'll notice that we also, when we click on the add button, we have the ability to add food. I'm not going to worry about that one just yet, but we will go ahead and make sure that we have all of the other functionality, and I'll come back and build this model using Daisy UI and some server actions with the form. So we have that model that is within this, but we also have this consistent layout for each of the days. So you always get either breakfast, lunch, dinner, or some form of snack, and that doesn't change based upon the day. So let's go ahead and focus on building that out now.